been Wheel of the Mercenary King here with my Sheeting Darkface deck profile. This Darkface is tried and true. It did win last week's tournament by the virtue of the fact that no one wanted to face it in the top 4. I count that as a win. Basically, what I did was I did a bit of net decking. I took the World's Champions Darkface deck and then made it my own with a few twists and turns. I will be making a video explaining his deck later. However, though, I do not have time. I'm currently working 6 days a week, and I don't really have much time on the one day I do not work. So bear with me. I know videos are slow, and that I seem to be the only one producing match videos, but we're going to try and change that up soon. I'm going to start off with my Grade 0 lineup as always. So, Childhood Command Rosenberg is my starter. I only run one starter, and it's this guy. Dark Device, G-Break 1. Put this unit in a soul. Choose one of your opponent's rear guards until end of turn. Until end of your opponent's next turn, it gets this card cannot intercept and cannot be chosen by the effects or cost of your cards. This is a good effect. Why? Because it means it screws over Shadow Paladins, Tachikaze, Murakumo, Great Nature, Spike Brothers, Pale Moon, Gold Paladins. I'm just going to keep doing it. Hold on. Gold Paladins, Link Joker, especially Messiahs. Who doesn't do a number on Messiahs? Like, this deck does a number on any number of decks that use their own units for fuel, which are actually pretty popular right now. Aqua Force, as well as Bermuda Triangle, and Grand Blue, kind of, but not as much as other ones. Other Megacolony units. Actually, I think it would be faster... This is Neo Nectar. I think it'd be faster to say how many people it doesn't screw over, and that number is Nubatama, Royal Paladins, OTT certain builds, Genesis certain builds, screws over Angel Feather. Hold on, I know I can get through this. Nubatama, certain Kagero builds. Screws over Narukami simply because you don't play anything, and then you just outdraw them while you stunlock their field as much as possible. Dark Irregulars because they're so Vanguard centric, and especially with the new Sharhar lot. That guy's a piece of work. Gear Chronicle, kind of. It goes both ways. Anyway, so basically, it has a big effect. Now, with Darkface's Stride skill, you can also have another one of him. So basically, you can have up to 5 times you use this. No, sorry, hold on. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 9. You can use basically a skill that prevents units from being used for the cost of the opponent's abilities 9 times if you use all 4 Darkface Strides in an order that keeps it very efficient. And that goes 1 Darkface Stride, 2 for Darkface Strides, 7? 3? 7, yeah. No, it goes 1, and then 2, then 4, then 3, then this one. So yeah, 8 times, excuse me. And you know what? And that's pretty good, because that means stand triggers don't work. And because I have other units that affect the units in the same row as that column, they can't intercept or do anything with it. It's pretty great, even in general. Also, this has the effect of tap this unit, choose one of your opponent's units, and tap it. And really, that's just to set off Dark Device, and then use Dark Device's skill to put it in the soul. So it's a pretty simple combination like that. This card doesn't really have any weaknesses, but at the same time, it could be a little bit better, but it's still very good. It is probably right now the best starter for Megacolony for this build. Maybe even for others, but not like Giraffa. Let's talk about my trigger lineup. I run 5 draw, 1 Raider Mantis, and 4 Ingot Chafers. Ingot Chafer is a Margle clone. Put this unit into Soul, choose one of your Megacolony, and gets plus 3k. I use it mostly with this chick, or with a recently placed Punish Stag, to hit 21k with a 7k booster, of which Vulcan Laferty and Little Dorcas is certainly one of them. And you'd be surprised how much 21 does. You might be like, well, Ben, why don't you run Buster Mantis and then Scissor Fingers? Well, that's not what the stealth build does, and honestly, that effect is a little bit hard to pull off these days. It is easier to do it with Aristocise Dark Device that is not bound by anything. 7 crits. Now, you might be asking yourself, by the way, these are the Darkface crits. This is probably one of the most useful crits in the game of this type. All the other ones simply give plus 5k and a draw. This guy also fuels his soul. I will tell you why that's a good thing later. So you might be wondering, Ben, Megacolony gives you a lot of passive draw. Why do you need 5 draw? Well, the engine of this deck is to get to the end game as fast as possible while keeping up a high defensive hand and shutting the opponent down as much as possible. It is not unusual for me to get like 12 cards in hand. You might be like, but Ben, I'm still confused. By the way, 4 heal. This is Best Girl, Best Cocoon Healer. I'm still confused. Wouldn't that just deck you out? It would, except I play 4 Legion. So the draws are actually incredibly useful in keeping my hand up. Keeping the soul up, by the way, the soul of Darkface is very important, as well as make sure I get these so I can cycle through the deck as fast as possible so I can get into a Legion turn, which basically means I have an immense hand and I'm stunning their Vanguard, if I'm lucky. I am very unlucky. 2 Brilliant Blister for the grade 1. This guy is when this unit is placed in Guardian Circle from hand. By the way, you can guard a rear guard with this guy and it still gets the same ability. Choose one of your opponent's Vanguards and that unit cannot stand during that turn. So basically, here's what you do. Somebody plays the Ace, or Vic Plasma, or Minerva, or the Legend, and you wait for them to do something, and then you do this, and you hit their Vanguard. You see, some of their abilities are set up very specifically such that you can screw them over, like, for example, the Ace, or the Legend by just hitting them, while they're attacking something that isn't very valuable, or while they're only doing a twin drive. It doesn't even have to not hit, it just cannot stand. This card is incredibly useful. This is actually one of the changes I made. The other guy had an 11k attacker or booster, and that's a grade 2. Sorry, grade 1. I, however, think that there's enough of a restanding meta running around with big plasmas, with Blue Wave, with others, like, I mentioned them, like the Ace, or at least there were anyway, that, you know, I need them. You might be like, well, Ben, but what about next stage? That's called having a perfect shield and a G-Guardian in hand. Next stage isn't as impressive as he used to be. Many times, rather than taking just one, he takes like 2 next stages to kill in a given player who's playing well. 4 Stride Enablers. This guy, you reveal a grade 3, and you search out a Darkface. You then put the Darkface in hand, discard a card. And then when you stride with it, it has +2 grades, so it counts as a grade 3. Probably it's probably one of the more useful cards in this deck in a general sort of sense for any situation. Besides the fact that he gets me Dank Faces in hand, he also makes sure my grade 3s aren't useless too early, as well as lets me spend Ingot Chafers and Raider Mantises or Brilliant Blisters if the deck does not have a restander to make sure I get an ideal first stride, which is Darkface, by the way. Then we have 4 Vulcan Laferty. I was super underestimating this guy. He is incredibly good. He has a Dark Device G-Break 1. Put this unit into your soul. At the beginning of main phase, you may pay the cost if you do countercharge 1. It's good for 2 reasons. First, it countercharges. Secondly, it fuels Darkface's soul. The second ability is also incredibly important. If you have a Darkface Vanguard, this unit cannot be chosen by the effects of your opponent's cards, and the opponent's units in the same column cannot intercept. You can combine him up with Darkface and Obturandus to basically create an ultimate lock on the field, that prevents your opponent from doing anything with their cards except to weep, despair, and wish they'd played more stands. It shuts down a lot of decks pretty hard here, as well as the fact that it cannot be chosen. If you have 3 in the back row, that means your back row can't be chosen for shit, because all 3 of them have resist. There's nothing to anchor onto. There's also a bunch of strategies that you can do with like 2 of them in the same column. It's just a lot of good things. This deck is useful in Darkface, even without the second ability or the first ability. It's just great. And what's more, it's not even called resist, which is funny. We don't even get the keywords. Then we have 4 Rebel Mutant Starshield. I do need the Counterblast on flip, the counter charge. Choose a card from your hand, discard it. Sentinel. When this unit is placed on G-Zone from hand, choose one of your Vanguards, cannot be hit until in a battle. If there's a card named Rebel Mutant Starshield in your drop zone, counter charge 1. So you might be asking, Ben, what about Paralyzed Madonna? What about Sweet Honey? Well, here's the thing. Let's say that I have a Dote player and they attack a rear guard. First off, if I'm stupid enough to put together a front row. But secondly, Brilliant Blister is my answer. They attack, they hit, I hit them with this. Sorry, Charlie, you're not restanding. And of course I choose Dote rather than the other one. Not only that, they can't use their .X ability. Also things like the Ace, things like other on hits, the Legend. Honestly, there's not a lot of reason why I want to guard a grade 2 or grade 3 in front row. They are pretty expendable to begin with. But also, there's the fact that I just have an answer for it. And even if they did restand, all that means is that they deck out faster. And I don't deck out with this deck. I've never actually decked out with this deck, I think. Except for once against Crash Heart's Reindeer deck, because I decided to give up a Legion so I could stride instead of Legioning to prolong the game and get me the win through his deck out. Like, my deck game isn't around decking out, it just happens to turn into that. It's like one of those things where I played it and it's like, this doesn't really kill people, but it decks the heck out of them. Unless you play Legion, you won't be able to beat this deck when it comes to deck out, unless you are Genesis and Dark Irregulars Bladewing with Tybalt. So long as I am able to maintain a pretty good hand, that is. Now you might say, well, anyone can do that, but when it comes down to it, I'll Legion every turn, because the Legion's really good. Cyclic, Sickle Mutant, Arista Scythe. Dark Device. I only run 3 of these. When this unit attacks, if there's no unit stood in the same column as this unit, except for, the opponent's, my units, this unit gets plus 2k. So it's a 11k attacker every single time your opponent is tapped. So in other words, it's Vanguard Rearguard. I put this on Vanguard, that's 16k to Vanguard. I don't mind grade stucking a guy and forcing him into like Sea Breeze just because I can hit 16k, which is always pretty useful. The next 4 cards are Punish Stag. This guy is the Darkface support. Dark Device. G-Break 1, Rearguard. When this unit is placed on Rearguard, if you have a Darkface Vanguard, which can be either through the stride or from the card from the man himself. This unit gets plus 2k. Choose one of your opponent's rearguards, and it cannot stand. And at the end of the turn, if this unit is tapped, your opponent draws a card. In other words, I draw a card. And then this opponent cannot stand during your opponent's next stand phase. It's a really great card in that it sets something down and lets me draw. I have drawn as many as 4 or 5 cards in a turn based around what is tapped and what abilities I use. It really repairs off of a Darkface, of an Opterandus turn. In fact, I've had turns where I Darkface, Opterandus, then I use 2 or 3 of this guy to basically shut down the field and laugh at them while they despaired. And then I drew all the cards. And then I didn't have a deck, so I Legioned. You see how it goes. Again, counterblast can get a little heavy. I kind of wish I had something that unflipped counterblasts, but that's what Vulcan Laferty, the Perfect Shield, is for. Then we have, lastly, for Machining Hornet, this is the Legion mate for the Legion. And this is, when this unit is placed on rearguard circle, if your Vanguard is Legion, choose one of your opponent's rearguards, and that unit cannot stand during an opponent's next sand phase. So basically, I actually combo him up with the Legion. And I guess I'll talk about him now, I guess. Who has the ability to Soul Blast 2 machining units. In other words, himself and the previous Legion mate, because he just rerode. And choose a unit, and it cannot stand. Late game, your opponent cannot afford, or it's too expensive for him to replace those cards. I've actually quite cunningly prevented Gold Paladin players from using Unite abilities to the fullness, or prevented Angel Feathers from restanding Broken Heart, or any number of things just from that ability alone. His Legion ability is also pretty impressive. Counterblast 1. When this unit drive checks, reveals a card with the same card name as this unit. If this unit is Legion, you may pay the cost. If you do... No, sorry. I've been up since 7, and it is now almost 11. 7 a.m., 11 p.m. Choose one of your opponent's Vanguards, and that unit cannot stand during your opponent's next sand phase. Basically, it's a counterblast 1 when you persona check stun. Now, let's do the math for a second. Let's say that I have 1 machining left in the deck, and I Legion back in 3 more machining, taking 1 to be this guy's thing. That means that of the 7 cards, sorry, of the 9 cards left, and I never do it at 6, so let's say 4, and then there's 1 machining. That means that there are not 7 cards left in the deck, 4 of which are this guy, or this guy, one of these two. That means that you're pretty guaranteed to hit it. However, fate is fickle, and you don't always hit it, which isn't bad because it still freaks out your opponent every time it happens. Simply put, they can't, at that late in the game, they have spent their grade 3 striding. They have spent their grade 3s for costs and perfect shields. They do not have many grade 3s worthwhile left. So, you just have to be careful with it. You have to use it right, and you have to fuck up the opponent like a scalpel. When your deck goes to about 6 cards or so, that's when you bring out this guy. That's when you prolong the game forever. Then we have Darkface, Intimidating Mutant Darkface. His G-Break 2 is Soul Blast 2. When your opponent's units are placed on rearguard circle, you may pay the cost. If you do, tap that unit. Basically, so here's what happens. Generally, late in the game, somebody makes a big play with units. Or let's say Gold Paladins. So let's say that we've ridden like this. Boop, boop. Sure, why not? But then, the previous turn, we happen to have 2 Vulcan Laferty, and we decide to stick it into Soul because I really needed the counterblasts. And then I used 2 of these units. And then I used 2 of these units. You know, it's just one of those things where there's just so much going on here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What? 9? I guess I'll stick another one in here. So now I have 10 cards in Soul. Now, realistically, I'm usually at around 8. If it's a good game. Sometimes I even re-ride. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we got 8 units here that we can do. First, Soul Blast the Perfect Shield, so you can use the ability to unflip damage. And then you came out with you came out with Paramore. Let's Soul Blast 2, tap Paramore. Oh, what's that? Paramore put out Brush Rugal. Let's tap him too. Oh, what's that? You're using, blah, 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 blah. It really comes down to smart usage and just preventing your opponent from doing things. It is not fun for your opponent. Let me make this clear. At no point in time is this deck going to be an enjoyable fight for your opponent unless your opponent has some way of countering you or in general enjoys playing you at a high level. Let me tell you that I am probably the highest level Megacolony player around, probably in the world, because I'm dedicated to this shit. So in other words, I make it even worse. I have beaten the other Megacolony players running around. They do not pose a challenge to me. even when they neck deck other winning championship decks. My homebrew of this is pretty hard to beat. That isn't to say I'm invulnerable. Vert, for some reason, really counters me. Except I lost to one Vash's Vert 6 times in a row, and then, of which all are on camera. You'll see them. And then I beat Kohaku and somebody else's, I forget his online handles, Vert, not easily. But I beat it enough that they were kind of like, sort of thing. His second skill, On Stride, is really good as well. But the point is that this deck just doesn't have much to counter it, is what I'm trying to say. Counterblast 1, Vanguard, when this unit is stridden, you may pay the cost. If you do, choose 2 of your units, and they get, at the end of turn, tap them. If they're tapped, they cannot stand during your opponent's stand phase, and if they're tapped, you draw a card. They can still be chosen by ability, which is why you run the Darkface Stride. So basically, you get to draw a card if they're still tapped, of course. And basically, that means that you get 2 cards off your opponent just not attacking or replacing units. Every time your opponent attacks you or replaces a unit, it's a minus to them. It's a pretty damn hard minus when it comes to things like Genesis or Dark Regulars. It's a really easy minus when it comes to Grand Blue, but Grand Blue we have other strategies for. But yeah, I got one more grade 3, and that's sort of like my secret surprise weapon I like to have fun with, and that's a Vectrazeus, undefeated mutant Vectrazeus. He's almost an avatar, honestly. If Darkface wasn't so good, I'd love to have him as an avatar. His main ability is a Limit Break 4, Counterblast 2, this unit gets plus 10k, choose one of your opponent's rear guards, and that unit cannot stand during the opponent's next stand phase. Whatever, smell you later, Holmes. The real ability is the auto. When this unit is placed on Vanguard Circle, retire all grade 1s or lesses of all fighters. It also has Lord. So in other words, let's say you're playing doubles. You screw over your friend as well as both your opponents. So in other words, let's say someone's playing your friend's just playing Laurel. Hopefully he's smart enough to remember that you play a Vectrazeus and he keeps a Laurel in hand because you're not allowed to communicate. But let's say the opponents play a Sanctuary Guard deck and, say, Gold Paladins, which often run quite a few grade 1s. All of a sudden, you can minus 6 or more both of those opponents altogether. But you could also minus 3 yourself and your friend. Hopefully, you don't do this to your effect where you have a full field. I have done this against Sanctuary Guard, I've done this against Grade 1 Rush. It is satisfying every time because the opponent usually doesn't have the cards to repair the field after you've screwed over all their boosters. Resist does not resist this ability because it chooses every Grade 1, period, rather than choosing any one directly. Honestly, he's a bit of a wild card. But when he works, it is so good. When he doesn't work, he's stride fodder. So he doesn't really lose, but at the same time, I am taking a Darkface stride spot out for him. He does deliver when I need him to. Let's move on to strides. My G-Guard is pretty simple. 3 Scarabgus. This is a 20k blocker for almost no reason. Basically, if there's 2 or more tapped units on your opponent's side, including the Vanguard, so Vanguard and Booster counts as 2, this unit gets plus 5k. It is probably one of the easiest, freest, and best Megacolony, G-Guards around. Just because he's so easy. He's like Laser Guard Dragon. Counterblast, this is Mutant Deity Fortification Grease Fort. Counterblast 1, when this unit is placed on G's during your battle, your opponent attacked by your Vanguard. Opponent's Vanguard, you may pay the cost. Opponent's Vanguard. I must make sure I remember that later. You may pay the cost. If you do, tap all of your opponent's units in the back row, and they do not resist it. This unit gets plus 5k for every 2 tapped units that are tapped until end of battle. So basically, your opponent attacks with the Vanguard, whether he boosts or not doesn't matter. Let's say that it's Blue Wave. They've got a resander that requires a booster here, and a powered up booster that can attack from the back row. So you basically hit this, counterblast 1, tap the back row. You basically cripple 2 or 3 attacks. Like, the guy up front can still attack, but he needs a booster to restand, so he doesn't stand there. And you hit the girl in the back row who could attack you from the back row, so that they lose an attack there. It can really screw up an opponent's game. Or let's take, for example, Sanctuary Guard. Sanctuary Guard, this really does help take down the guard necessary to spend in a single turn. Or let's take something like Dimensional Police, counterblast 1, tap the back row. Well, guess what? They can't use Laurel. It doesn't even matter whether the opponent knocks it out with the Daikaiser or not. It's going to be gone. So let's talk about our next abilities here. I run 1 Waspy Tail. Like Gleesfort, like I might run 2 in my Giraffa deck, but this deck only needs 1. You use it like a scalpel, and sometimes you don't even use it for the guard ability. You use it for the prevent boosting ability. Waspy Tail is pretty interesting. Soul Blast 1, flip a copy of a G-Zone unit over. When this unit attack hits a Vanguard, you may pay the cost. If you do, choose one of your opponent's units, and all units regards in the same column, so vertical and row, horizontal. Actually, let me move this stuff out. Cannot stand during the opponent's next stand phase. Now, it doesn't tap them, but they should be tapped. And they couldn't stand during the next stand phase if they were tapped. So basically, let's say they let this hit Soul Blast Cannon. Okay? I choose this one. This and this cannot stand. I can choose the Vanguard. And this cannot stand. I choose this guy. Well, this guy can stand. Your Vanguard can stand. Wait. Yeah, regards. Dupe cannot stand. Now, keep in mind, the best places to hit are here, here, or here. Do, or do. If you do not touch those units, you'll actually be less efficient and less, affecting with it. Now, if they only have a front row, do the Vanguard. Just hit the Vanguard. You never know when you're going to have to tap a booster. You know what I mean? I run 2 Paraspear. Paraspear's ability is when this unit is placed on Vanguard, tap all your opponent's units. If the number of tapped units your opponent has is 3 or more, in other words, Vanguard and 2 rearguards, draw a card, this unit gets plus 5k. I do this for the hand and the power. He can hit, oftentimes I'm on a Darkface, and I can use him. So I get another draw, another plus 5k for a 36k Vanguard attack. It's just pretty good. It's a beater, it's a hand drawer, it's everything I ever need. I've not regretted running Paraspear, and sometimes I wish I run more. But hey, we'll figure that out later. Then I run 3 Stun Beetle. Now here's the thing. I don't know why Megacolony players are so surprised I run Stun Beetle. I've had no less than 2 Megacolony players come up to me and go, "Oh, that's a surprise, you still run Stun Beetle?" After they've wasted Perfect Shields guarding like Paraspear or something. And so they can't really guard this, so I hit them with it. His ability is G-Break 2. He was the first G-Break 2 ever revealed, by the way, for a stride. Counterblast 2, choose a face-down copy of itself, turn it face up. When this unit attack hits a Vanguard, you may pay the cost. If you do, your opponent Vanguard cannot stand, and they cannot normal ride. They can still superior ride. For example, if I stun a 7 Seas deck, their Pledgeton can stand from the drop zone. However, it's not quite the same, and they have to counterblast 2, which means they lost cards. They lost resources overcoming this guy's ability. He is a guaranteed perfect shield. You might be like, but your Vanguard usually gets a perfect shield. Not early game. If you G-Guard, then play this guy, it is a thing of beauty. Especially since, even though you don't really have access to 2 counterblast, it will cause your opponent to do a minor freakout and force misplays from them. This deck needs to be run of at least 2 in every Megacolony deck. Guaranteed. Always. Why? Because his ability is just too good. The cards that, let's see here, cards that Superior call Superior Ride. There is Pelennor, excuse me. Certain Alfreds. Shadow Paladins, kind of. For certain abilities. There is, let's see here, Gear Chronicle with the Bela Chronojet deck. There's also Darkface. Sorry, not Darkface, Darkrex. 7 Seas, like I said before. You know, there just isn't, like, I'm searching through them in my head, and there just aren't that many that do that. Kagero, too, kind of. But there's a lot more to him than just that. Besides the psychological effect it has on your Vanguard, they do force out a perfect shield. They do force your opponent to misplay. They do force your opponent to guard. They must guard, or they're guaranteed to lose the game. These days, there's so many card advantages, cards running around, that just doing it once won't let them lose the game automatically. However, that is one turn where you don't have to worry about perfect shields, guarding, or anything else like that. Or it's one turn where they're forced to give up equal or greater resources to overcome what you did to them. It is one of the perfect Megacolony cards. Speaking of that, there is Merciless Mutant Deity, Darkface, Counterblast, Vanguard, once per turn, Dark Device, Counterblast 1, flip up a card in your G zone, turn it face up. Choose up to the same number as the opponent's rear guards as the same number of face-up cards named Darkface in your G zone until end of turn. Opponent's next turn, I guess these units cannot intercept and cannot be chosen by card effects at cost. That's right, they can't be restood by stands. And for each rear guard chosen by effect, plus 5k. So in other words, late in the game, and I flipped over 3 of them, I get plus 15k for a 41k attack before booster. That's pretty good. Just the fact that you hit them with, let's say, a Darkface Stride, then you Counterblast 1 for Darkface, tap those 2. Counterblast 1 for this Darkface, flip over a copy. Hit the one you want to stay tapped. They will have to recall over it for it to gain any abilities in. Besides that, if they leave it out there, you'll probably draw a buttload of cards. You know, it's just one of these cards that snowball, and by the time you've done your 3rd one, it's going to be pretty impressive. Now let me show you how you use him. So the first turn you do only 1, 1, 2. Then this moves over here. Next turn, this, flip over something else. For example, Waspy Tail. 2 plus 10k. This moves here. You do it again. Let's say this time, Obturandus. So you get 3 plus 15k. That's the most efficient way I've seen to use them, especially when you specifically target units that need to be targeted rather than cards that don't need to be targeted. For example, if you hit something that would sacrifice itself pretty easily to Tachikaze or to Kagero or something like that, you just go, nope, it's going to stay there, and no, it can't restand. One of the things that is fun to do is do this, hit 2 Nahalims in the front row, flip over this, put the starter, because most people don't seem to run Gatling Claw for some reason anymore, hit the front row, then you have Darkface to stun whatever he puts out in the front row. It's just a really great thing to do. This is a really versatile card. He doesn't even need Darkface as a heart. And so if you have any deck that can really stun rearguards, of which there's just Darkface, Cyclomath, and Machining, you really do want to run a couple of them. Just in case. Unless you got other things. Then we have Lawless Mutant Deity, Obturandus. This is the GR. Its SGR is currently the most valuable card in the TCB. Megacolony is on top, yo. It is S tier. And, you know, you just guys can't compete anymore. His ability is G-Break 2, Act, Vanguard. Counterblast 2, discard a card from your hand. Which is why I run so many draws. And cards that let me draw. And cards that stun so I can keep as many cards in my hand as possible. Your opponent cannot call his or her units to rearguard until end of next turn. They cannot superior call. So apparently superior call is a fake thing that was sort of named by the players. I don't give a shit. It's just not something I worry about. You see, this halts your opponent's board state. That's the best way I can describe it. At no point in time can your opponent do anything other than minus himself or do a little housekeeping. For example, those who would do that would be something like Shar-Herlot, Tachikaze, which I can counter anyway with, like, the starter. Tachikaze, Shadow Paladins, others. Like, so many things just stop working when this guy says, okay, no rearguards can be called by you this turn. And then, of course, you run things like Vulcan Laferty, put it in soul, give more soul to your Darkface, unflip those counterblasts. You might be like, but Ben, it's a real minus. But that's why we have all these draws. That's a statement for a lot of these things. That's why I have Punish Tag at 4. That's why I run Darkface. That's why I run Parasphere. You know, there's a lot of ways to get hand in this deck. All of it goes to Obturandus and other cards, abilities, and so on that go on. I mean, it's just such a good card. It is as good as Darkface here. It's almost as good it is better than Stun Beetle in certain ways, but Stun Beetle is better than other ways. You know, there's just so much good that comes of this card with this deck. If you are facing something like Royal Paladins, you Obturandus, they can't call any more cards. Then you Punish Stag them. You Darkface them. Counterblast 1, stun 2 units, place this on rearguard, stun a unit. Then you draw cards. So all they do is they say, attack you with something that you can perfect shield. Like, say, Religious Soul Saver, and they don't get any stand triggers. Well, that's too bad, isn't it? Draw 4 cards. You can't do anything. And then maybe I do it again, maybe not. However, I'm going to warn you. This card should not be used 4 turns in a row, or 3 turns or 2 turns in a row. It's just not one of those cards you can do it with. You should not do it. It's too much of a minus. It is like using Seabreeze every turn. You might be like, but Ben, they can't use their rearguards. Yeah, but here's the thing. What happens to you when they can? Here's how it works. You draw a card, you spend 1 card to stride. You discard a card for this guy's ability, you draw 3 cards from his drive checks. And that's before you get any cards off of Darkface and other skills. And you might say, well, I could get enough guard from it. Yeah, but what if you don't? What happens when you're facing something like, I don't know, Nova Grapplers, and there's a turn where you're out of counterblasts and you can't stun anything. And because they already have a Sazand out because you were stupidly not attacking it to try and kill it, or putting it under a perma-stun of some kind, you know, it's going to come in hard and heavy. And that Nova Grapplers player is going to be kind of pissed. And guess what? You spent 4 cards of the last 4 turns on Obturandus. And sure, you might have gained cards, but I bet you used a Perfect Shield as many times as possible to block their Vanguard. You know, it's one of those things. Nova Grapplers against this deck kind of goes up in the air. At one point, Darkface shuts them down. At the same time, things like Obturandus don't work unless they don't have a field. Because they don't need to replace a field anyway unless it's destroyed somehow. Always attack the Sazanda. This is actually a really good card against Nova Grapplers. Yeah. this is my deck profile. As you can see, if you are aware of what the winning deck profile is, mostly what I took from him was the Legion idea and the setup for my grade 1s. Other than that, it's kind of my own build. He ran 4 Aristo Scythe and only 3 Punish Stag. He did not run, he ran 6 draws, I run 5. He also run 2 studs, sands, and I have all those as crits. He did not run a Vectra Zeus. He didn't, let's see, I don't think he ran full Legions for the grade 2s. And I think he had a bit of a different setup for his strides. You might notice I don't play Seabreeze. That's because several of my abilities work without Seabreeze. And so, you know, you can do it if you want to. But here's the thing, Darkface will be waiting. You know, it's just, I don't care. You know, I'll just manage my damage. I'll attack your rear guards. I'll force you to minus. And then when I do minus you, it comes in all the harder. You never go to grade 3. Whatever, friend. Doesn't bother me. I get around it pretty easily every time. And, you know, I just don't care. You know, if you don't ride grade 3, guess what? I wait my time, hit a Vectra Zeus. A Vectra Zeus. Kill those grade 1s. Guess what? You've been only drive checking 1 card a turn for the last couple turns. So instead of having, say, 9 cards in hand, you have 3. You know, there's a lot of things that go on when you grade stuck a guy at 2. And I'm prepared for it. You might be like, what if you don't draw a Vectra Zeus? Well, what if you don't? I'll find something else to do with it. I'll wait till they stride first. You know, I've got time to worry about it, guys. There's no strategy in this game, except for stuff like Vert and a few others, that... Well, sorry, there's no strategy in this game apart from clan dynamics that screws me over. I haven't found one yet. There might be something I'm not thinking of. If you do find it, post it in the comments, as long with your comments, ideas, suggestions, and mockery. Though I will ignore you, most nobly. I'm talking about you, Gary Smith, asshat. Anyway, always with the criticism. Yeah, that sort of covers everything here. The deck, again, won a tournament. It will continue to win tournaments. I'm going to take it to Kansas City. I'm going to take it to Chicago. I'm going to have a lot of fun. My opponents will despair, chew their beard, take out their swords and ritually disembowel themselves, stamp their foot so hard they carve themselves in half, and in general want to quit the game. However, motherfuckers, I have my deck of glory. It is an S-class deck, I do believe, if I do say so myself, and I will enjoy every second of it. Been Wheel the Mercenary King. Have a great night.